Yeah, so in what situations, I guess this is something that I've encountered probably more than most people because I've been heavily involved in clan politics at a pretty high level. Uh, so this is something I've considered quite a bit. It's a question of what situations, if any, is it ever acceptable to simply ignore a clan that has declared war on you? Um, I think that the, I think that's something people tend to dismiss offhand that there's no war you should ever decline. But I think there are situations when, yeah, it is acceptable to reasonably simply ignore a clan that has declared war against you. I think I did this once with Exodus with Cypress Legion. Corey, if you can check my memory on
Yes, we
that.
did.
Yeah. So they were an ally of DA, and DA was currently worthless at that point in time. So they declared war on us, um, which in and of itself isn't problematic. But after talking with them, and I think the video they post on YouTube is still there, they declared war on us. It declared war on
Vast.
Vast and declared war on Navcom just to make it more difficult for themselves, right? So it's a clan who literally showed up and just declared war on the three largest clans they could find, just for the purpose of being at war and doing raids and shit. And the video they post on YouTube is pretty sarcastic. If that's something I can find on YouTube, I'll try and link it here. Or Corey, if you can find it, you can link it here.
Yeah, looking for it.
But I guess the question is, for you, obviously a lot of people here currently lead clans or have led clans. Are there situations where you think it's acceptable to simply ignore a clan who has declared war against you? And if so, what might make you reach that decision? I'll toss up to whoever wants to address it first.
if they have a reason.
I mean, you come across
Mhm.
clans, in my opinion, you come across clans who, you know, if they declare war for no reason or there's no logic behind it, they're just seeking activity just because they're bored, then that's something, why would you waste resources on that? That's in my opinion, though.
I don't think you should ever just outright ignore a war declaration. I think you should respond either, like, let's say your clan is incapable of engaging in said war. You should definitely engage them with a conversation and tell them why you're incapable of doing it. And maybe if they're not assholes, they'll be understanding and try and work something out at a later date. Like, it's not, you know, when we declared war on the RSL for the second time in Trident, they just outright ignored us, and we knew they were incapable of doing it. But they never came to they never tried to have a conversation with us and say, "Hey, we've got a lot of stuff going on. We can't really get to this war. Maybe we can delay it and work it out as a reason a different date." And we would have been fine with that and give them some brief room to breathe and regroup and maybe actually get a decent war going on. But they just outright ignored us, and I don't think that kind of defeats the whole idea of declaring war on clans in my eyes, because what if you can just outright ignore it and just act like it never happened, then that
You're kind of cutting out.
you cannot ignore it and you must give a response.
I think that you brought up an interesting point here because when I originally posed a question, I originally thought of the question. I thought of it from like a strictly like political role play clan mindset. So something closer to what the Clone Federation might perceive it than a relatively non-political clan like say Navcom or Trident might perceive it, right? So I think the question of like what does a declaration of war mean for a clan like Navcom or Trident is probably a functionally different thing than what Clone Federation or Exodus views like declaring war. Um, so I think it's an interesting question where if you are a relatively non-political clan and you declare war, I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong here, Craven, that you're perceiving the act of declaring war simply as a mechanism by which you demand some other clan engage you in raids, right?
Yeah, for the most part. And if they're incapable of, like I said, doing so, then it doesn't have to be like there. Then okay, I want to play you, but I don't want to play you just now, like right this second. If you can't do it, then I want to do it at some point in the near future.
Yeah, so I think so. Like from my perspective, is like a more traditional like political role play clan mindset. I think that it's important that when you declare war, your declaration of war has something greater than just give us some raids attached behind it, right? There needs to be some sense of it's hard to describe. It's some reasonable role play justification for why you're declaring war. So, um, for example, like if your ally is currently at war and you go ahead and declare war against them, then that might be a reasonable declaration of war, right? If this clan in some way threatens your clan or is disrespecting your clan, harming your clan's public image, then I think you can reasonably go ahead and justify declaring war there. There are some caveats. So my first point there when I said that, well, if your allies at war, then your declaration of war is justified. That's what Cyprus Legion did with Exodus, right? So face value, that might be justified, right? But when you read into it, as I said, they literally went ahead and declared war on the three largest clans they can find. Navcom and Vast were not at war with them at that point in time, right? They were literally going out just to effectively start shit and get activity. And I don't view necessarily wars for activity as a valid war I should have to engage in. So that's why there's
Yeah, I agree to it. I agree. Yeah, you should definitely consider reasonings behind it. If you could try to find, like, if you, like I said, if you can engage with them in a conversation, um, get a reasonable reason out of them, then I think you should engage it. But if you can't get any sort of reasonable justification for engaging in a war, like let's say three kids just randomly made a clan, just declared war on like 10 different clans, much larger than them, and they don't really give any reason to do it, then I think at that point, yeah, definitely there's no real reason to do it, but I don't think you should just ignore it. I think you should at least try to have a conversation with these smaller clans trying to do this, and then get their reasoning. And then when you find out what their reasoning is, or if they don't even come up with a reason, then you can say, okay, this isn't worth our time, clearly, because then at least you've responded with a conversation and not just outright ignored it altogether. Because they may have some reason. It may be stupid, but you could find out this reason and use that as a reasonable standpoint to not engage in this war. So you should always respond to it with a conversation or engaging in it. That's my views anyway.
I think somebody else will briefly chip in. Yeah, go ahead.
In my opinion, though, like there's a lot of small clans out there. Like for example, you may come across this small clan who only may have 12 members or so, but you never know what these 12 members are capable of. That's the thing with dealing with large clans and small clans. This small clan of 12 might be able to kick your fucking ass. It's quite simple to say. You never know what they're bringing. So in all honesty, if they're just out for attention, then yeah, you should ignore them. But just to deny them the activity, I mean, it'll help them get their name out more. So that's what I noticed. Like a lot of little clans, they try to gain popularity by declaring war on bigger clans, but that just doesn't ever work out for them unless they have the force and the skill to back it up. Especially in Halo 5, where it's more skill based than anything.
Anybody else want to chip on the topic? Because Alex is more than just me and Graven and Lycon here. So
Lycan, it's
I'm gonna
Lycan.
mispronounce it forever. Let's just ignore that. So as nobody else chip in, I guess I'll continue the topics, right? So I think so far we discussed like the merits of the war must have some reasonable justification for that declaration of war, right? I think that there might also be a situation where if the clan who's attempting to engage you has a very clear history of really problematic behavior in the way they conduct wars or the way they conduct raids, right? And it's unreasonable to think that you can get fair raids from a clan. I think that in those situations it might be reasonable to ignore their declaration of war, right? So this is the entire topic of when is it okay to decline or to ignore a clan that has declared war against you is a super subjective thing with a whole bunch of caveats by its very nature. But I think it's important to discuss how at least people think through this decision making. So suppose, for example, that I'm CFAO of Exodus, and there's a clan that declares war on us, but this clan has a very clear history of like never following ROE, or in the event this clan has violated ROE, they ignore that and just go ahead and declare war wins or raid wins regardless, right? Or they have a clear history of every clan that has engaged them in battles had disputes over ROE with them, right? I think there's, from my standpoint, right, when I take a look at that clan, I'm thinking to myself, in the event we do engage them in battles, it's unreasonable to think that our clan will effectively get like a fair shake from these raids, and the entire conflict will devolve into petty drama and disputes the entire time. And at that point, I think it's a cleaner break to simply ignore that declaration of war, right? And that's acknowledging what the reason they're declaring war might make sense, right? So if suppose they are helping an ally, then they have reasonable justification to engage us in battle. But I think that if you can't expect them to conduct themselves properly in a war, I think that in and of itself makes engaging them in war impossible.
If I could say something about wars and all of that, I think coming from experience, I've worked with DA and NRI for quite some time, and the one thing that I've noticed that goes on between them that I haven't had issues with a few other clans was, just downright stubbornness and unwilling to negotiate, basically. To me, a war should still be fun no matter what, as it is a source of activity. Yeah, you may have your personal dislikings for the other clan or the other entity that you're going up against, whether they consider themselves a clan or not. And what is your guys' opinion on that, about clans that, because we're on the topic of clans that not clans, but just going over war in general, and whether their declaration should be ignored or not. And what is your guys' opinion on being able to negotiate with these sort of clans? Like, how should that operate?
I think.
What do you mean by negotiate?
Yeah, go ahead.
Just sort of like ROE, map fairness in general. Being able to open up a diverse sort of battleground tactics. Just doing different things to make the raids more interesting and so on and so forth. Like, people have brought up in the past lore slash story raids, like I believe it was who was it? It was a while ago, damn it. There was some cybernetic clan going up against a like a death clan or something like that. I forget how to describe it or how they described it, but it was really interesting. Like technology taking over an abandoned land, or like an abandoned clan going after technology to destroy it completely again. It was more of like a war over lore, rather a war of just hatred and petty bullshit. It was something that would have caught interest in eyes, rather than just, oh great, here we come, another bullshit nonsense war. It was one of those things.
So are we talking about like lore wars, or are we talking about how negotiate ROE? Because I think you kind of veered off your path.
Well, I was just trying to answer his question. I'm just the ROE should. What do you guys think should be discussed when it comes to ROE and being able to handle these few clans? Like, for example, when we were going to war with DA wanted their ROE.
I think that's kind of. I'll jump in. I think that's kind of outside the scope of the question, right? Like, I don't think. So, like, the decision whether or not a clan merits engaging them in war should be decided before you discuss ROE. To use a rough metaphor, right? You need to decide whether or not you want to buy a car before you decide what color car you want to buy, right? So you need to decide whether or not you're going to engage a clan in war before you decide how the ROE for that clan should be treated. So by acknowledging that you want to engage this clan in war, then the discussion of ROE is a different topic.
Well, if I may throw my
Go ahead.
My opinion in here on the whole ROE thing. Personally, I believe if you're going to declare war on someone, attacking or defending, if you're defending, I believe that ROE should be used as, if it's going off a lore standard, that's their base. You're attacking them, so why should they have to edit their rules? Attacking them and all their shit, you know?
ROE's kind of my pet thing, so I guess I'll. Oh yes, I'm sorry, UNSC. You had people in the background. That's why I muted you. Apologies. Um, apologies. Do you want to say something? Awesome. So to the topic of ROE, I don't think. Well, to the topic of ROE, I think that this is the nature of like, well, how if you, two clans are going to agree to engage each other in battle, right? Then I think that if they both agree to an ROE, then both clans are under an obligation to make their maps meet that ROE. Um, I don't think that if you agree to an ROE, that you have the right to demand that, well, our maps don't match this ROE, but there are maps, so we don't have to change it. I think that once you agree to meet a certain standard, you're obligated to meet the standard you agreed to. I'm not sure if that addresses your point, Mark.
Oh no, absolutely. I definitely agree with that. But say NRI decides to declare war on DA, and then NRI is like, hey, NRI should have to agree to DA's ROE. Some things up to debate, but you can't just be like, all right, we're going to attack you, but you're going to use our ROE because we don't like your ROE.
Yeah, this is
having a debate about it.
Well, see, that's something that I ran into with DA was, whenever we tried to get some sort of leniency, and like, for example, when Bellicose first started the war with DA, we had enough members to fill 3 lobbies. Reason we were so skeptical about it was because when we had our altercations with DA seemed very protective over them. And there's clans like TFS, for example, who recently done practice raids and have had severe lag outs, And for some reason with DA, every single raid or practice raid they do, it's always some sort of attempt to show dominance. Like, for example, one raid when for one practice raid we had with DA as Bellicose was on Fort Fenrir, they ended up taking a base. Why? Because we had members messing up, the defenses were not secured, and so on and so forth. Second raid, we improved our men, we brought in better troops, and DA was not able to take the base. Immediately, what they did was they called the base OP and, tried to get us to change things, and alter things,
I think that
it's one of those things where if clans don't get their way, they tend to, say your base is OP, or they try to go after a political standpoint against you to make you seem like you don't play fair.
I think we've shifted topics to ROE, so I'm going to cut the topic and pull up some other ones people have suggested here, just to keep the conversation a little more guided.
All right, before we change real quick,
word,
can
go ahead.
Bring up something that you said earlier that
last word.
I've actually been thinking about quite a bit.
Go ahead.
Somewhere along the line, talking about war, along the phrase came up as people who can't decide on a win. Do you guys think that, say, in community servers, to people that help solve these disputes, instead of 2 clans constantly bickering in these community chats for hours and days on who should win because of this reason and this reason?
I guess I'll take the sole shot at this before we shift topics. Right. I don't think community conversations. Correction. Community. I'm thinking of how to frame the answer properly. The decision of who won a raid is always going to be, it shouldn't be, but in practice, it's usually a very subjective call, right? So this happened with Exodus and Vast for our second raid, where by the rule of the ROE, Vast violated ROE, so we declared a raid win. They looked at it and said, well, the violation was pretty petty. We don't think that had a significant enough effect on the raid to invalidate our win of that raid, right? So we took that issue to the community chats, right? What community chats do in ROE disputes is they help build a public consensus. So it's entirely possible, and I think if you brought Z4 here today, I don't think me and him would ever. I don't think he would agree with me on who won the second raid there, right? But if the general community consensus is X clan won a raid, then I think that generally speaking is all that really matters. Um, a lot of wars are issues of public opinion and public perception. So to that end, I think that if 97% of people theoretically agree that Clan A won a raid, right? Then I think that's all you could really hope for. I don't think that um, I don't necessarily think that having the two clans involved admitting or confirming a certain clan won is necessary for a result to be determined. To the next topic, because I want to make sure we're moving at a pretty steady pace here. It's 20 minutes, so uh, let me see here.
This watermelon flavor is fucking amazing.
Nice. So we'll go with Kai Summers. Should he be able to declare war on a clan that is? Should he be able to declare war on a clan entirely based upon the lore of that clan? So I think the most common thing. This is super common before my recent return. So this is in 2014, 2015. You had the UNSC insurrectionist thing where Exodus was seen as like an insurrectionist clan, and you had NAVCOM as like a UNSC clan. So by nature of their lore in and of itself, they declared war. The question is, are those declaration of wars justified? I'll throw that up to discussion.
Now, I think that still boils down to, is this clan ready to do war or to go into war? Because
what's the point in choosing a faction if it's just going to be purely aesthetic?
Here's
May I
a
throw something in real
so yeah, go ahead, Nick.
Okay, just real quick. I think my personal thing that I've always followed is if a clan is not openly on one side, like they do not call themselves insurrectionists, then it's not proper for a UNSC clan to declare war for that reason. But if a clan is calling themselves insurrectionist openly, that's what they're going for, then yes, then the UNSC clan is justified, and vice versa for all factions.
So that's a slippery slope. What counts as openly stating?
If you claim to be insurrectionist,
I'd assume it's people just like, yes, we're an insurrectionist clan. You know, we
Yes.
roleplay as insurrectionists, or yes, we are a UNSC clan and we actively roleplay as the UNSC.
do UNSC things.
Exactly.
So the insurrectionist clans that when you ask them, are you insurrectionists, they say no?
I say yeah. 'cause I am.
Here's a question.
I'm sorry.
Here's a question
Oh.
though, right? So suppose
Of course you do.
Suppose I'm an insurrectionist clan, and I say that I'm an insurrectionist clan, but I'm not inherently hostile to UNSC clans. I'm just insurrectionist, right? I'm a peaceful
Oh, that's like
insurrectionist
Mike now.
clan, right? In those cases, do you think that lore justification makes sense?
No, I don't.
I mean, I guess it could.
Well, I mean, the fundamental. If you're calling yourself an insurrectionist is like a rebel to the UNSC. Therefore, you're a hostile. You're anti-UNSC. So,
But
I mean, to call yourself an insurrectionist, but you're not immediately
Yeah,
hostile
what's
to UNSC. Is kind of like
I
Not
I
the opposite of
explicitly
what you are.
stated- But I think that gets into like the no true Scotsman fallacy, where if I explicitly stated that I am not X, like I'm not hostile to UNSC clans, and my clan behaves in a way that isn't hostile to UNSC clans, I, at least in my personal opinion, I don't think it's reasonable for you to just superimpose your beliefs of what an insurrectionist clan is upon my clan. Use that, you know what I mean? I'm not sure if
So at that point, I'd assume it's just up to the insurrectionists. You know, if a UNSC, say I'm UNSC Clan A, you're Insurrectionist Clan A, but you're peaceful to UNSC clans, and UNSC Clan A is like, hey, you're an insurrectionist, and we're declaring war on you because you're insurrectionists. Like, well, I decline because we're peaceful. We don't really want to get into this engagement with you.
I don't think you would necessarily. This is an interesting thing where I feel like, especially when I talk, people miss this point. Where when I say a war isn't justified, right, that does not necessarily mean that I think the Klan has justification to decline that declaration of war, right? So, to the case we're just talking about, I don't think the UNSC's Klan's declaration of war against the peaceful insurrectionist Klan is justified, right? I'm leaning towards the idea that the insurrectionist Klan should acknowledge that war and should pursue it. But because that war is not justified, because this is what appears to be a war of aggression from the UNSC to the insurrectionist Klan, right? For all the third-party clans that see this war occurring, they should look at it and be, wow, this UNSC Klan is being unjustifiably aggressive towards this Klan. We should take some steps against that UNSC Klan. So I think that in that case, the insurrectionist Klan should probably acknowledge and pursue that war. But I don't think the declaration of war against them to begin with was justified.
I don't know. I think the
So
whole
you're saying
idea
it's valid, just not just
insurrectionist plan with the UNSC is oxymoronic. It doesn't make much sense to call yourself an insurrection if you're not going to be hostile towards UNSC forces. Then you should just become a private military because,
but that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
You can still be insurrectionist, but not openly hostile. You can be politically insurrectionist, or you can just be insurrectionist, but you just don't want the same.
Or you can just like the insurrectionist theme and not want to pursue the fucking morals.
Rebellion. So your private military can remain a private military, but the second you go into open rebellion with the UNSC, that makes you an insurrectionist Klan.
Yeah, so I'm going to have to agree with that last statement there. I don't think that you can really claim that you're politically insurrectionist to UNSC clans, like being hostile towards them, because that doesn't fit the definition of being an insurrectionist. We're talking Hale-wise, obviously.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
This is a thing where it's like, at least from my personal perspective, I've never been a fan of the entire, like, themes being part of politics thing. Like, when I was CFA of Exodus, I'm sure you guys have dealt with me at one point or another, right? I never really perceived, like, the allegiance of a clan, so I never... When I was looking at NavCom, for example, I never looked at it and said, well, they're UNSC, they logically have these opinions, right? When I looked at...
upon UNSC personnel frequently.
Yeah, when I looked at... I'm trying to think of another clan that had lore between them, right? But when I'm looking at clans that have themes, right, in my personal mindset, I don't think that their theme or their setting, if they're a Star Wars clan, there's an Empire and there's a Rebel clan, I don't necessarily think that should have an indication on how their foreign policy should function.
Yeah, in practicality, that is true. We have all these clans that have these, backstories that don't jive with their backstories whatsoever, right? But ideally, the choice to make your clan of a certain theme should have some gravity in the community. And I think the fact that we've desensitized ourselves to seeing, hey, it's an insurrectionist clan, they're automatically going to be hostile towards UNSC. Seeing so many peaceful insurrectionist clans has really, dampened our response to, hey, they call themselves insurrectionists, right? We're not automatically going to assume that they're hostile towards UNSC, which I honestly think's ludicrous and a problem. We need to have clear set roles for these factions. Otherwise, there's no point in having factions other than aesthetic reasons, which is, lackluster.
I'd argue, I don't know. I think that this is something where you take a look at general community trends, and I think it's trended towards factions are simply aesthetic, right? I think that the end of Reach, like towards the end of Reach, and it was, I forget the exact alliance names, I wasn't there for it, Corey was, he can explain. But when it was NavCom versus Exodus and UNSC versus insurrectionist community, and that was going on, right? I think that was the peak of the relevancy of factional systems. I think that once Halo 5 came along, the importance of the UNSC insurrectionist label faded off entirely. If you take a look at the most notable UNSC clans over the past year, so that would be Navcom, Infinity Command, and now Orion Command, I think is the clan that is formed, or Orion Initiative is the clan that is formed, right? They're UNSC clans by title. That has no bearing on how they actually function. To go back to summer 2016, when it was Exodus versus Vast, right? I made it a pretty clear point to make Exodus a non-insurrectionist clan, but clearly a lot of people still perceived us that way, right? Navcom chose to assist us, the clan that they were at war with for pretty much a year on Halo Reach, right? They chose to assist us over the entirely lore-less or theme-less Vast, right? I think that the importance of titles, the importance of ideologies, as Gren said, doesn't really matter at this point. I think that
Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying. I said we become desensitized because we've stopped assuming that an insurrectionist clan behaves in a certain way. We've entirely disassociated behavior from faction. It's become entirely aesthetic.
So do you think it's a good thing?
I honestly don't. I think that just takes away from our ability to engage on site in open lobbies. I think Human Covenant War Days, you hopped in, you were able to shoot at Sangheili without those Sangheili saying, "Oh, we're peaceful." And the people who did do that were autistic. So, I mean, it was pretty simple, clear cut. It was easy for newer members to understand, and it's got a lot of serious growth from randoms participating in clan games, which is what we want to promote ultimately, because the inductive capability of randoms for clans to get more members is greater than clan kids.
I think I'd pretty firmly disagree. I think that if we're reliant upon the very theme of a clan as the defining aspect of its foreign policy, right? If by very nature of making my clan Covenant, for example, defines how my clan will function politically for the entire duration of that clan, right? Then that really limits the amount of meaningful diplomatic role play and community role play in general that you can participate in, right? Because under the system you believe in, right, it's entirely impossible for the entire duration of my clan for me to ever have an alliance or some sort of agreement with a UNSC clan, because the very foundation of my clan opposes that.
The thing is, you can have transformative events, right? Like, let's say your loyalist Covenant clan goes through some sort of revolution, becomes separatist, right?
No,
or your insurrectionist clan goes through some other sort of revolution and becomes a private military. There is transformations that are possible in lore that would actually add depth to the whole entire community, role play, foreign affairs, all this stuff. There's a lot of sides of this argument.
I think that I think that to rely upon game lore as the basis for how clan, quote, lore functions shows a lack of creativity and a lack of meaningful role play in and of itself. I think that in my ideal mindset, I think the community itself, the community itself should generate good role play, and the community of itself should generate good lore. Like the war between Exodus Navcom on Halo 5 generated lore in and of itself. The war between DA Exodus generated lore in and of itself. The war between Clone Federation and NRI created political fallout in and of itself, right? I don't think that we should take a look at things and be like, well, pull out books on Halo to determine how our clan should function.
Well, if you are calling yourself Covenant or UNSC, I do believe that game lore should have an effect on how you behave politically in the community.
Oh,
towards
yeah.
just say
other
something about this
Covenant
topic.
or UNSC
It's
clans.
not like anyone's being
Um,
bound by the law, you know? It's not like, hey, I really wanted to go to war with this body, but since I'm a loyalist Covenant clan, I can't, right? You can go through some sort of transformation or make up your own lore that would ultimately add depth and actual community news that would be meaningful to the whole entire system.
THL?
if I, yeah, I was, I don't know if how THL used to be a UNSC clan, and we were very different from UNSC clans. We instead of going just by the fact of the game is our entire lore, we mainly structured ourselves as UNSC and then built our own behind that. So, for an example, we were basically a lost ship that made it out, of the first Halo. We would just be able to get out, and we started recruiting people, finding outer colonies, and we basically built our own unique lore around the game itself. And I think that was more enjoyable than actually being just complete UNSC and game lore. I agree with Power that.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Roleplay.
There is things that you can do, right, to actually generate depth and ways to distinguish your clan from just being a vanilla UNSC clan. Like
See,
where vanilla UNSC clan, this part of our backstory allows for this governmental structure. You know, it's not very defining. It is actually more of an explanation. You can't just have these random ass shit. I mean, I saw a recruitment for Sangheili ODSTs the other day. I mean, the amount of bullshit that's gone on with the complete disassociation from lore to clan community has gone on so far that we're getting Sangheili ODSTs. It's completely out of hand.
Oh, no,
so
I agree
situation
with that. Go ahead.
is that it
yeah,
seems
Panda,
that
then THL. Go ahead.
it seems that you've only structured yourself as a UNSC clan. Did
No,
you
no,
guys
no,
really
no.
define yourself as
No,
UNSC?
okay, so I'll explain it. So how we
Get
were.
that you guys were like a lost ship and all, but from the way you explained it, you said that you went to quote unquote outer colonies and recruited people. Yourselves as UNSC at that point, or are you structured like them?
All right. So to explain it, we considered ourselves UNSC because the lore was we were finding colonies that were unable to get in touch with the actual UNSC, the ones that were connected to the inner colonies and such. So we were finding people, and then we would recruit them. That way, we can continue to find. We were searching to get back to what you could say is humanity, and then we continue to fight there. But we built off that so we used that kind of as a culture, and we were a little bit darker than most UNSC clans. We were able to identify and make our own unique lore. So as I said, we were just structured. So we had Marines, ODSTs, and we had a Spartan program that never got used. However, what it was basically a structure for UNSC. We made our own lore behind it. That way we could identify with our own clan, not be like every other UNSC clan, and implement our own ideals and culture. If that makes any sense. What I've noticed, and I like to bring up, is since we've changed to our own kind of private military, as you could say, with our own unique lore, I've noticed that there is a lack of people interested in joining as a standard UNSC clan. So, for an example, how THL recruits is we have multiple ways of recruiting, but one of the ways is we send messages to our recent players on our matchmaking. And I found it easy. I think it's easier for people to connect with just saying that you are a UNSC clan, and people instantly could relate to that because they're on a Halo game and they know the UNSC. But now it's where I'm from THL, we call her with a homeworld Stygian or whatever we say, and we're a member and we would like for you to join our clan. And I think there's a little bit of a disconnect and people are kind of reluctant at first to try.
I'm trying to think of how I'm viewing this, right? Because like I've always viewed individual clans at the broadest level as like individual sovereign entities, right? Effectively, like it sounds cheesy, but effectively it's like little nations per se, right? And I think that making yourself or your clan a function of the lore, I think, to some degree undermines. I'm restating what I said, but I think by saying a UNSC clan should normally function in this way, unless there's some lore exemption to it, right? And force yourself to justify changes in policy via lore really undermines things, right? Like I'm UNS suppose I'm a UNSC clan, right? And we're at war with some other clan, and it would be effective for our clan to make an alliance with some Covenant clan because that would increase our chances of winning a war. I don't think I should have to justify that alliance by saying, well, back in the UNSC thing, there's this one battle where the Covenant and the UNSC fought with each other to do this, right? I don't think I should have to justify pragmatic decisions for the benefit of my clan. And I think that by making clans a function of UNSC or Insurrectionist or Covenant or like 501st or Warhammer 40K culture, right? By making a clan a function in your policy, by viewing your clan policy through the lens of your lore, I think limits unreasonably so the quality of roleplay and the interaction between clans in the community.
I kind of disagree with that. I think, in my personal opinion, I think if you have this, you have a lore and a unique culture. Say, for example, THL, our lore is we're a very aggressive people. We don't really like outsiders or other clans, so we come off as aggressive and snarky.
Just to clarify, is that part of your lore, or is that just how your clan behaves?
No, that's like a part of our lore. Like, whenever somebody comes to our planet, our initial instinct is to kill them. That's like how we act.
I understand. Once again, I just want to be specific. Like, I understand that's how you act and function, right?
Mm-hmm.
But was that something that you sat down and was like, we do this anyways, that's just part of our lore? Or did you...
No.
Was that part of your lore, so you acted...
I understand what you're asking. So whenever we started basically what a clan that I actually wanted. So when we sat down, we kind of figured how we were as UNSC clan and how we acted, right? And what type of culture we wanted to start. And we all, me and my higher ups, agreed that we wanted an aggressive, culture, people who aren't afraid to open fire on anybody. Not saying that we would open fire on anybody, but aren't afraid to kill. So we implemented that lore, and now if we host, say, a meeting with another clan, our guys are going to be extremely aggressive to any foreigner on the map. If they kill the foreigner, I would personally have to apologize because I just say they did something wrong against our protocol. But to move on to the topic, I think if you have a lore that builds a culture for your clan, I think you should run with it, that policies. Because, say, for an example, if we just allied with every other clan possible, it doesn't make sense with our lore and kind of defeats the purpose of having the lore building culture that we were trying to create, if that makes sense. Like, what's the point of having a lore that says, we are usually aggressive people, but we ally with every other. Like, to me, that doesn't make sense.
I don't know. I like, two comments here, right? I think that the way I'm interpreting what happened there is that you guys sat down, decided what type of clan you wanted to be, and then made a lore to match what your clan was going to be, right? So I would have to, yeah, but at that point, I'm not sure how the UNSC label applies at all. Because suppose, for example, you guys sat down and were like, I think that we should, I think that the type of clan we should be is we're going to be friendly with all the clans we we come across, right? So the lore of our clan will be, well, we're a UNSC clan that got lost in space, so we turn to everybody because we need help to survive, right? At that point, you're just using lore to justify what you want to do, and the lore becomes meaningless in terms of defining what your clan, how your clan will behave, because it's just following your personal decision making. Um, I kind of forgot my second point. Give me a second here. Um, yeah. So to speak of the whole thing, where it's like, as function of our lore, we don't make a whole bunch of alliances because that doesn't match with our lore, right? But I would have to assume that if that's something that you sat down with and was like, in order for my clan to get large and be successful, we need to have a whole bunch of alliances, right? I think it's reasonable to assume by what you just said that you would just shape your lore to match what you wanted to do. So it's
Um,
interesting. To me, it's interesting how for you agreed that you shaped your lore to match the clan you wanted to be, but then a couple minutes later, you said that we can't do this because our lore says we can't. When you just said your lore is malleable to what you want to do, I'm not sure how those two mesh.
if I can speak up, I remember when we went to war with THL, one thing that he stated was he did not want to set up ROE because it went against lore and they wanted to keep it older or old
That's
style.
negative. It had nothing to
We
do with
are
it.
not
Are you
okay. I'm
sure?
gonna kill the conversation here. We are not digging up this crap right
Yeah.
now. Next topic.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'll kill topics if I think they're dumb. Let's not do that.
One of the topics I wanted to bring up was an interesting one: scripting.
Ooh,
I saw it.
scripting
Yes,
is patient.
I saw it posted. Let me
Scripting
see
is
it.
very
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah,
Yes, that's gonna be very
Lord, go
interesting.
ahead and introduce the topic.
Yeah, scripting is a feature that was made available, and I think that scripting has been abused within raids. For example, locking the enemy out of the base entirely or pressing a kill switch that murders everybody inside. There could potentially, if explored, be ways that scripting can be used to enhance raids, to make them more fun, or add like map hazards for the defenders and attackers alike that they have to be aware for.
I'll take first shot. Because I dealt with ROE for a lot of clans. It's my
Yeah.
personal instinct that because scripting gets so messy and because it's so likely to be attacked by, as you said, the question of is this overpowered or is this being abused, right? Because
Yeah.
of that, in Exodus's ROE, I think in Vast ROE, in the Commonwealth ROE, those are three at the top of my head. I think, as I said, to the point, it was my personal instinct to just blanket ban scripting because it's so likely to get messy really quickly. And in terms of like, is it worth having this argument, and is it worth sitting there after a raid and talking about was this overpowered? Like, because it's so gray, it was my personal instinct to blanket ban it.
Understandable. Though I think still like scripting is a field that could be explored. Like for example, if you push up into the enemy base and you like kill their anti-air guns, like you get a drop pod with weapons that can help the attackers. Or like say there's like Tempest and it has energy barriers, like if you kill the generators, then that means the energy barriers get shut down, thus making it easier to get into the base.
No, like to the point. Like I've seen I've seen dozens of things in scripting that I think would be really fun in raids, right? But sitting there from like clan leadership perspective, I'm assuming you're a clan leader as well. But like,
I'm not.
Okay. So, but like sitting there from the CFAO position in Exodus, and there's a lot at stake when you're in a clan leaderist position, right? I think this is a thing where I think clan leaders and clan members view things two different ways. Where it's like I appreciate the fact that our members think XYZ is really fun, right? But I know that in the event this happens in a war, I'm going to have to convince the community that, this particular scripting function was not overpowered. And I think that when it comes down to are these arguments worth it? I don't think it is, because it's so, like, suppose it's something really basic like a door, and like the question is, well, this door will stay shut for 10 seconds when you press this button, right? That might
Right.
not seem overpowered, but maybe if the doors stay shut for 1 minute, that's overpowered, right? So you
Yeah.
literally get into the question of minutes and seconds, and
Yeah.
I don't want to be making the arguments of minutes and seconds to the community chat or to clan leaders, because everybody has different opinions on that.
Right.
So I think it's just safer to blanket ban it.
ROE nightmare.
Yeah, and from my perspective, I see that, and I'm like, it's simply not worth it.
Not only that, but also some people will try to do loopholes and grasp straws. Like, for example, if you have a door and there's got to be a button outside, then they might make the button to a spot on where the defenders can slam a rocket down. So that means you really can't get in the base at all. Chance, as I could call it.
Anybody else have other opinions on this? Because it's just me and him, and I want to make sure there's other opinions on this. People have.
So for scripting, one thing that I was very aware of was like for clans like DA and NRI, I believe THL uses this as well, and Orta, and maybe a few others. There's boundary scripting where you can basically tell if there's a player in that area. Like radars and such.
Yes.
For lore wise, I think it's very interesting. However, I would probably only use that sort of scripting on like a meeting map in the case of a flash raid. But for like an actual raid, to me, raid should be fought with stealth and just sheer force. So for that to be implemented, that's something that I don't think is necessary.
Yeah,
Radar.
You'll never.
17 go first, and then High, you can respond.
Okay.
Yeah, it seems a little bit unintrusive to know where players are in a general area and heat zones, but frankly, that just eliminates all stealth gameplay, which is a big part of raids. I mean, frankly, raids as a game type are pretty bare bones and simple, so any sort of variation that's taken out by scripting, I think that should be disallowed.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it was like radars and motion sensors cannot substitute for situational awareness, and it's like if a guy manages to break into the base and get past all 8 of your guards without getting seen, then I think it would be a bit cheap to have a motion sensor instantly catch him.
Yeah, see, like
I think you should be able to make that play.
I think this right here gets into the question of, back to our first topic of, like, when is it acceptable to decline a war declaration, right? I think this right here is a good example where it's like, suppose there's a clan that like, their maps are so fundamentally unfair or overpowered, blah, 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 right? I think that if as I said, if a clan is, I'm trying to think how to word it properly, right? Where if a clan is so fundamentally different in their approach to what a war should be like, right? In the basis of, like, if like in map design, their idea of what constitutes a fair raid map or a good raid map is so fundamentally different from your clan that it's incompatible. I think that, and it's supposed, like, through ROE discussions, you can't resolve that. Like, they really want XYZ in their map, and you fundamentally oppose that, right? In those situations, I think that it's reasonable. It might be reasonable to decline that declaration of war because, right, in the event those clans were to engage each other in battle, right, the question of, like you effectively lost. Like, suppose you engage a clan that uses OP scripting and you lose these battles, right? Like, you lost playing a style of clan warfare your clan never normally participates in ever, right? And still fundamentally opposes. I think that at that point, the entire usefulness of those battles and the war doesn't really mean anything. And I think that in those cases, it might make sense to decline it.
If I can add something.
Go ahead.
So, like Envarger brought up, I brought up the radar system we have. However, ours is not as, say, advanced as, say, DA's, NRI's, or ORTA's, because we don't want it to be too advanced. The way we view it is, our system is basically a giant boundary. So we have 4 sectors. There's the spawn sector, there's 2 lane sectors, and then there's the one right up against the base. But there's a little, if you get up against the wall, it can't detect you. Because we want to be able to still implement, you say, that stealth gameplay. And I think it just, I think it'd be fun to raid base of a radar system like the ones we have, because there's loopholes in it.
But
I think it just varies within the clan.
I think so. My first question to that, right? Like, I don't intend to put you on spot here, but by nature, I'm going to do it. My
It's
first
fine.
question is, like, how are you defining what is fair, right? Or what is, like, reasonable? Because suppose, like, my clan has radar system on their map, right? And we zone it so that we know if you're in this zone, you're behind one of these 3 pieces of cover, right? Like, you can have a low amount of zones. Like, I'm not sure how you're defining fair, because presumably it would be really hard for you to engage NRI in a raid, right? And then call them out for being unfair, because at that point, it's almost entirely subjective.
I don't know. The way it just varies. Like, I personally think our maps are relatively fair in how we do things, but some other clans aren't going to view that as fair. But to me, a raid is never supposed to be completely fair. It should be reasonable, but not completely fair. If that makes sense.
But, like, I
So
understand, but, like, reasonable is so subjective that it
yeah,
might as
well,
well
I
not
understand.
matter.
Yeah, well, I mean, it just varies person to person. It would have to be up to clan, because no matter what, there's not going to be there's not going to be a set standard. It's going to be clan to clan.
Do you think it would be
So,
reasonable for a clan to refuse to battle you in a war because of the radar system?
if they so wished and that was their sole purpose, then that'd be perfectly fine.
To go back on that, you stated that yours isn't as advanced. I built a few maps with Axios, and I've been on several of his maps. Them and NRI, they have basically the same scripting as Visari. Me and Axios used to forge a lot together, and they created the script, and it's literally the same thing as yours.
I am hesitant to pursue a line of topic where we're debating particular map design when none of us have seen the maps or scripting in question. So I'm going to go.
I've seen some of Asari scripting. I have many of his bases.
No, I understand. I don't want. I'm trying to avoid a situation where we're getting impressions about how particular clans' maps are without actually seeing the maps. I think that's unfair to THL, and that's unfair to everybody involved. So I don't want to pursue the line of discussion.
If I can throw something in real quick,
Nicholas, go ahead.
A solution to some clans. This wouldn't work for all. Not everyone supports scouting, and I understand why completely. But for those clans that do, that could be the exact solution to scripting, is they would see it beforehand and decide. Both clans would decide if it's fair or not, and discuss what problems they may have with it, and find a solution in that way.
That's fair. I think I know. I was always a super huge proponent and a super big supporter of scouting as, like, a way to resolve map issues. I know Vast Contagion was, if that means anything. Navcom, Corey, I think they did. I'm almost positive they did. Can you put on that? Awesome, yeah. Corey. Yeah, okay. So, like, there's significant precedent for, like, larger clans to favor this type of thing. I think this is a function of, like, it's just mad. I think it's a thing where it's like, because larger clans tend to interact with so many raids so often, right? And having map tours in map scouting just reduces the amount of bullshit you'll see after the raid and community chats. Where it's like if you scout a map and agree to it and agree to raid that map, right? As long as you aren't hiding shit in the map that they can't see during the scouting, I think it really reduces the amount of drama because you always can say, well, you guys reviewed it. You saw it was, you believed it was fair enough to raid, right? So you
You
consented
basically dug
to
your own
raid.
grave.
Yeah. So I think that
Yeah.
scouting really helps reduce the amount of bullshit you see in raids.
Yeah.
Nicholas has a good point, Frank. Thank you for bringing it up.
Oh, hey Bill.
Yes.
Actually,
do you
actually,
remember?
no. We're an hour in, so I'm going to cut the recording here. And
Alright.
give me a second here, and you guys can keep talking afterwards. Oh, no,
Alright.
no, didn't mean to do that. No, stop it. Hold on. Oh no, please.
Power, if you're gonna talk to inanimate objects, I'm gonna mute you. I'm joking.
I'll actually mute you.
Get